Many players see folding as a sign of weakness, yet seasoned players know that the true strength lies in restraint and discipline. In this series, we'll delve into the art of folding, exploring how careful observation, thoughtful calculation, and emotional steadiness can transform your game. From understanding pot odds and mastering position to the nuances of bluffing and bankroll management, each chapter will guide you through the intricacies of making the right call. Whether you're navigating the dynamics of live play or the unique challenges of online games, you'll discover how the discipline to let go of a promising hand can be your greatest asset. As we embark on this journey, prepare to challenge your instincts and rethink your strategies. The path to becoming a skilled player isn't just about the hands you play. It's about knowing when to fold and waiting for the right moment to strike. Chapter 1. The Art of Folding. A strategic overview. Most hands you are dealt are not worth playing. That is not a pessimistic view of the game. It is just the math. Players are betting, raising, and calling. It can be tempting to stay involved in as many hands as possible. The truth is, though, that successful poker relies just as much on knowing when not to play. It is worth saying plainly, folding is one of the most powerful tools you have for protecting your stack. Every decision you make in Texas Hold'em comes with a set of options. You can check, call, bet, raise, or fold. Folding is the only option that guarantees you will not lose any more chips in that particular hand. This is crucial because poker is a long-term game. You do not need to win every pot to be a winning player. In fact, most strong players tend to fold a large proportion of their starting hands before the flop even comes out. They do this not out of timidity, but because they know that most hands start off behind. By consistently discarding weak or disconnected hands, they avoid investing chips in situations where they are unlikely to win. If you look at the habits of experienced players, you will see that they treat folding as a normal part of their routine. Rather than viewing it as giving up, they are being selective and patient, waiting for the right spots to put their chips in. Over time, this discipline preserves their bankroll. It also helps manage the natural swings that come with the game. By folding hands that have little chance to improve, you reduce the number of times you are forced into tough spots, and you limit the risk to your stack. Folding is about being thoughtful. Treating folding as a defensive measure leads to steadier, more controlled results over hundreds or thousands of hands. There is a common belief among new players that folding is a sign of weakness. Some think that if you fold too often, you are letting other players push you around. Others feel that seeing a showdown is usually worth it, just in case the cards fall their way. This mindset can be costly. In reality, many amateurs lose money precisely because they do not fold when they should. They hold on to hands with little chance of winning, hoping for a miracle card. But poker rewards the player who works with the information available, not the one who waits for a miracle. Imagine a situation where you face a tough decision on the turn or river. You have some outs, which are cards that could still improve your hand. But the odds of catching one of those cards are low, and the bets are getting bigger. Instead of calling just because your hand looked good a moment ago, a disciplined player will recognize when the math is not in their favor and let the hand go. This is not weakness. It is strength. It takes courage to step away from a pot you have already invested in, especially when your hand is not terrible. But the best players know that folding is as important as betting or raising. It keeps them out of traps and lets them fight another day. Some players get attached to certain hands, especially those that look strong before the flop. They might think, I cannot fold this hand, it is too good, but poker is about flexibility. Even the best starting hands can become second best by the river. Many strategy guides and coaches emphasize that folding a premium hand is sometimes the right move, especially when the situation is clear. If the betting gets heavy and your opponent tends to play straightforwardly, holding on to a strong but non-turn hand often becomes difficult to justify. The ability to let go even when it feels uncomfortable is a mark of a disciplined and logical player. There are specific moments when folding a strong hand is not just acceptable. It is the right play. In multi-way pots, for example, the odds that someone else has a premium holding go up. Even if your hand is good in absolute terms, it might not be good enough when several players are involved. Recognizing this and folding early can save you a lot of chips. Another common scenario is when you face aggressive action from a player who rarely bluffs. You might have a solid hand, but if all the signs point to your opponent having you beat, folding is often the lower risk choice. There are also patterns that can cost you money if you are not careful. Some players will call bets on the flop and turn with a good hand, only to fold on the river when the pressure gets too high. This habit adds up over time. Instead, it is usually better to recognize when you are likely dominated earlier in the hand and make the tough fold sooner. This does not mean you should be folding every time you face a bet, but it does mean you need to be honest with yourself about the real strength of your hand in the current situation. Even starting hand selection is a place where folding strong-looking cards can be wise. Beginner charts often recommend folding hands like low pocket pairs or weak aces from early position. These hands might seem playable, but in practice, they often get you into trouble against stronger holdings. By letting go of hands that are only strong in isolation but weak in context, you avoid being outkicked or outdrawn. This is especially important when you are out of position, where acting early puts you at a disadvantage for the rest of the hand. Position-based guidelines make it clear that you should be folding most hands when you are first to act. Only the strongest pairs and high card combinations should be played from early position. This can feel counterintuitive at first, especially if you are used to playing more hands. Over time, though, you will notice that being selective leads to fewer difficult spots and more opportunities to capitalize when you do enter a pot with a real advantage. As you grow more comfortable with folding, you will start to see it as a proactive part of your game plan. Each fold is a decision to conserve chips for a better spot. You are not just avoiding losses, you are setting yourself up to strike when the odds are truly in your favor. This patient, selective approach is what separates winning players from those who chase every hand. Folding is a skillful act of self-preservation and long-term planning. Before each decision, take a moment to ask yourself whether this hand is worth more of your chips. Trust that letting go, when the read is right, is one of the stronger moves available to you. Each fold made with purpose is a quiet step toward a better spot. Patience and discipline are not passive traits at a poker table. They are the ones that compound over time. Chapter 2: Psychological Barriers to Folding Good Hands. Strong cards feel different before a hand even starts. A big pocket pair or suited high cards carry a kind of weight, something that makes you want to see them through. Those hands look powerful and feel exciting to play. It is easy to understand why players get attached to them. You might notice a pattern where you feel reluctant to let go. Sometimes you remember a time you won a big pot with a similar holding, and it leaves a mark. That memory can stick and make the hand feel special, as if it carries some kind of luck. As the pot grows and the betting gets heavy, it can feel almost painful to fold a hand you started to root for. This kind of emotional attachment is common. It can lead you to call bets you know are risky, just because you like the look of your cards. You may even find yourself ignoring what is happening on the board or how aggressive the betting has become. Instead of letting logic guide your next move, you start to focus on how much you want to see your hand win again. Sometimes you keep calling even when the hand no longer looks strong, simply because stopping feels worse than continuing. That pull is especially strong when you have put in chips on earlier streets. If you find yourself clinging to a hand just because it feels familiar or lucky, pause for a moment. Ask yourself if your decision is based on the cards and action in front of you, or if it is coming from a place of hope or memory. Learning to recognize this pattern in your own play can help you detach from specific hands. The more you practice letting go of attachment, the easier it becomes to fold when you know you should. There is another feeling that tends to creep in. You fold a hand, then watch the board develop in a way that would have helped you. That sting stays with you. The next time a similar spot comes up, you hesitate, not because the hand is strong, but because you do not want to feel that sting again. It can push you to call bets with hands that do not deserve it, especially in spots where you know your odds are long. When several players are in the pot, the chance that someone already has a strong-made hand increases. Still, fear of missing out can make you want to chase that one card you need, even if it is unlikely to come. In many games, players driven by this fear keep calling bets on every street, hoping their hand improves. Yet the improvement often does not arrive. In many cases, they end up folding on the river, after putting in far more than an earlier fold would have cost. These decisions add up over time. The pots you win by chasing tend to be rare, and the chips you lose by calling too often can accumulate significantly. If you catch yourself thinking, "What if I fold and would have won?" that is a sign that fear of missing out is in play. Becoming aware of this feeling is the first step toward making folds that protect your stack. Cognitive biases also shape the way you see your hand and the action at the table. Confirmation bias is one of the most common. It pulls your attention toward information that supports what you already want to believe, and quietly steers you away from signals that suggest you are behind. For example, you might see an opponent make a large bet and convince yourself they are bluffing just because you want to call. Or you might focus on the few hands you remember where calling down with a strong-looking hand worked, while forgetting all the times it did not. This bias can show up in subtle ways. Maybe you notice a raise on the flop and interpret it as weakness, even though the board is dangerous. You hold on to the idea that your hand is best, and you do not adjust your thinking as the betting gets bigger. Over many hands, these patterns can cause you to misjudge how often your calls are actually profitable. Basing your decisions on selective evidence can make you lose touch with what is really happening at the table. Confirmation bias is not the only force working against you. Optimism bias can lead you to overestimate how strong your hand is, even on boards where many better hands are possible. These biases can be hard to spot in the moment. That is why developing self-awareness is so important. If you catch yourself searching for reasons to stay in a hand, step back and look at the full picture. Consider the board texture, the betting action, and how many cards can actually improve your hand. Recognizing these mental habits is not about being hard on yourself. It is about giving yourself the space to make clearer, more objective decisions. Letting go of attachment to specific hands, staying aware of the pull to chase pots, and recognizing your own cognitive biases all help you fold more wisely. When you practice noticing these patterns, you will find that the decision to fold comes with less friction and more confidence. Let yourself slow down and listen to what the game is telling you. With practice, you will find that the decision to fold comes with less friction and more clarity. Chapter 3. Reading the table, opponent behavior and tells. Your cards tell one story. The players around you tell another. Learning to read both at the same time is where the real edge lives. Sometimes the most revealing clues come from what players do with their bodies. You might notice a hand that trembles as chips go into the pot. A player who suddenly sits upright when the action reaches them. Or someone who becomes perfectly still, as if holding their breath. These physical behaviors, often referred to as tells, are linked to how a player feels about their hand. Shaking hands can mean excitement or nerves. A sudden change in posture may signal a burst of confidence or a wave of anxiety. The way players talk, or stop talking, can also give away information. A person who gets chatty out of nowhere, or someone who goes silent just as the action heats up, may be feeling the pressure. Sometimes a shift in tone or a nervous laugh can suggest discomfort. Other times, a steady, even voice might hint at calm or experience. In live no-limit Texas Hold'em games, less experienced players tend to show more noticeable tells under pressure, though every player is different. The pressure of a big decision brings out these small but telling changes. Not all tells are clear or reliable. One gesture or comment might mean nothing on its own. That is why the best players treat tells as just one part of their process. They watch for patterns instead of jumping to conclusions. Maybe a player always fidgets when they are bluffing, or maybe that is just how they sit. Over time, careful observation helps you separate what is meaningful from what is noise. Many players keep notes to track these patterns, even when those notes exist only in memory. This habit builds a clearer picture of each opponent, little by little. Another subtle tell can come from how quickly someone glances back at their whole cards after new community cards appear. If a player looks back right away, they may be checking whether those cards connect with what they hold. This action does not always mean strength or weakness, but it adds another layer to the information you collect, providing more context when facing a tough decision. While tells can nudge your decision one way or another, they're rarely the whole answer on their own. You want to combine them with other data from the table. Treat every tell as a hint, not a verdict. That way, you avoid the trap of relying on a single clue and missing the bigger story. The next layer of information comes from betting patterns. Every action a player takes across the hand adds to that sequence, and the full picture it creates is often more reliable than any single physical cue. Paying attention to these sequences is one of the most reliable ways to read an opponent. Some players tend to raise big when they have a strong hand. Others use the same small bet, regardless of what they hold. When you see consistent patterns, you can start to make educated guesses about what their bets mean. For example, a player who always raises large in early position is often playing a tighter, more value-heavy range. That does not guarantee they are strong every time, but it increases the likelihood. Timing can be just as telling. A long pause before a bet can sometimes suggest someone is working through a tough decision. That might mean a marginal hand or some concern about being behind. A quick check or a fast call can suggest they already knew what they wanted to do. Some players act quickly when they have little, hoping to project confidence. Others take longer with strong hands, trying to seem uncertain. These are tendencies, not rules, and they vary from player to player. The key is to watch for repeated habits, not just single moments. Bet sizing shifts can also reveal changes in strategy. If a player suddenly starts betting much bigger or smaller than usual, that may mean their confidence level has changed. Maybe they want to protect a vulnerable hand, or maybe they are trying to build a pot. Whatever the reason, noticing these shifts helps you judge whether their aggression is genuine or just a show. It is easy to misread a single fast call or a single long tank. That is why you want to build a mental catalog of each opponent's habits across many hands. Observing these patterns over time helps you see how their actions align with the strength of their hands. When you spot a pattern that matches their previous showdowns, you can use that information to make better folding decisions. If a player always bets big with the nuts and small with bluffs, that can help you let go of a strong but second-best hand when the big bet comes. Beyond individual tells and betting patterns, the feel of the table as a whole shapes every decision you make. Understanding who is driving the action and who is staying quiet changes how you weigh your own hand in any situation. Position is a big part of this dynamic. When a player raises from early position, they are often working with a stronger range. That is because they know several players are still to act behind them, so they tighten up. In contrast, someone in late position can open with a wider range, since fewer players remain. That means a strong hand in early position is not always the same as a strong hand on the button. Context shifts value. Chip stacks also play a role. In tournaments, a short stack may shove all in with a narrow range, since they have less room to maneuver. If you hold a strong but non-nut hand and face a shove from a short stack, you need to weigh whether their range is tight enough to justify a fold. In cash games with deep stacks, players can apply pressure across several streets. Facing a big bet from a deep stack can make even a strong hand feel vulnerable, especially if the betting pattern and table dynamics suggest real strength. Sometimes the whole table is playing loose, with lots of calls and wild bets. Other times, everyone is tight and cautious. If the table is aggressive, you might see more bluffs and wider ranges. If it is tight, big bets are more likely to mean big hands. These trends help you decide when to stand your ground and when to release even a strong holding. Staying aware of all three layers lets you make decisions rooted in observation rather than hope. Tells, betting patterns, and table dynamics each add something. Together, they give you a much clearer picture. Each clue adds to your understanding, making it easier to find the right fold when you need it most. As you practice watching, listening, and noticing, trusting your read and protecting your stack becomes second nature. Notice the rhythm of the table and let small details reveal themselves. Over time, your choices will grow steadier, and your confidence in folding stronger hands will rise. When you fold with awareness, you're not just giving up a pot, you're deepening your understanding of the game. Chapter 4: Pot Odds and Expected Value. Mathematical Foundations. The numbers in front of you on any given hand tell a story that your instincts might miss. What you feel about your cards and what the math says about them are two different things, and knowing when they disagree is where steady decision-making begins. This is where pot odds come into play. They measure the risk of calling a bet against the reward the pot offers. To figure out pot odds, you look at the current size of the pot and compare it to the amount you must call to continue. For example, if the pot holds 100 and you need to call 20, you are being offered 5-1 on your money. That means for every one you risk, you could win 5 if you end up with the best hand. Some players flip this ratio and think of it as call to pot. Either way, the relationship stays the same as long as you stay consistent. It is not just about the ratio itself, though. Pot odds help you decide if the risk you are taking with a call matches the chance your hand will actually improve. To make this more practical, you can convert pot odds into a percentage. Take the amount you have to call and divide it by the total pot size after your call goes in. If you need to call 20 into a pot, that becomes 120 after your call. Divide 20 by 120. That comes out to roughly 17%. This tells you that you need to win at least 17% of the time for a call to break even. Having this number lets you step back from emotion and look at the situation with clarity. When you know your odds, you can compare them to your chances of making the winning hand. If the math doesn't support your call, folding is likely the stronger move, even when you like your starting cards. Pot odds are the anchor that keeps your decisions steady when the action heats up. There's another layer to this that shapes how you see each decision in the broader context, and that's expected value. Expected value is a way of calculating how much you stand to gain or lose, on average each time you make the same decision in a similar spot. Instead of thinking about one hand in isolation, expected value asks you to imagine repeating your choice over and over. Would you come out ahead, or would you lose money in the end? The basic formula for expected value looks at two possibilities. First, you multiply the chance you win by the amount you win. Then you subtract the chance you lose multiplied by the amount you stand to lose. In poker, if you expect to win a certain percentage of the time, and you know the size of the pot and your call, you can plug those numbers in. If your expected value is positive, that means you would make money over a series of similar situations by continuing. If it is negative, folding would save you chips in the future. What is powerful about expected value is that it can show you when a call that feels tempting is actually costing you money. Sometimes your hand looks strong on the surface, but the numbers say otherwise. Expected value does not care about a single outcome. It is about the average result over many hands, stripping away the drama from any one decision and focusing on the bigger picture. When you put pot odds and expected value together, you get a clear lens for seeing when folding is the best play, even with hands you might usually want to go to battle with. Start by figuring out the pot odds for your call. Next, estimate your real chance of winning the pot if you play. This could come from counting your outs or thinking about how your hand stacks up against what your opponent might have. If your chance of winning falls below the break-even percentage set by the pot odds, the math tells you that calling is not profitable. For instance, you might hold a made hand that wins sometimes but not often enough. Pot odds can reveal that the money you put in now will not come back to you in the long haul, even if you win the pot once in a while. Expected value calculations back this up by showing a negative result for calling, especially when your opponent's bets are large and the board favors their range. In these spots, folding a hand that feels strong is not weakness. It is a sign of discipline and respect for the numbers. This approach protects your bankroll and keeps you from chasing pots that are not worth the risk. By leaning on pot odds and expected value, you can train yourself to look past hope or frustration and see the game more clearly. Every time you fold a hand that the math tells you to let go, you are making a choice that adds up over the course of your play. Small edges and well-timed folds tend to separate steady winners from those who struggle consistently. When you're facing a tough call, take a moment. Check the pot odds. Work through the expected value. Let the numbers guide you, and let folding settle into your strategy as something natural. When you trust these foundations, you will find yourself making clearer, steadier decisions, staying out of trouble, and building your results hand by hand. Let the calculations settle in and become second nature. With each careful fold, you are choosing a path that is built for enduring success and the quiet strength that comes with it. Chapter 5: Position and its impact on folding decisions. Your seat changes everything before a single card is dealt. Not because of what you hold, but because of who acts before you and who acts after. Your position shapes when you act during each betting round, and it changes every hand as the dealer button moves one seat at a time, clockwise around the table. Over time, you'll see each seat and experience the advantages and disadvantages that come with acting first, last, or somewhere in between. You already know that your seat in the order matters. Early positions mean acting with less information. Middle positions offer a bit more context. Late positions, especially the dealer button, let you act last after everyone else has shown their hand. That ordering is the foundation everything in this chapter builds on. Position isn't just a label for your seat. It's a lens through which every poker hand can be viewed. Acting first or last changes how much you know, how much risk you face, and how much pressure you can apply or avoid. Even when you have a strong hand, your position can transform it from a clear play to a risky gamble. That's why experienced players tend to pause and consider their position before deciding whether a hand is worth playing or folding. In late position, observing the actions of others before you act provides valuable information. Every bet, check, or fold ahead of you adds context. Notice who is aggressive, who is cautious, and where the action is heating up. This flow of information lets you make more accurate judgments about the hands you face and the risks you take. Acting last gives you the chance to control the size of the pot. You can call, raise, or even check behind after seeing how others have acted, which puts you in the driver's seat. Having the ability to control the pot is not just about maximizing value with strong hands. It is also about protecting yourself with weaker or marginal holdings. If everyone checks to you in late position, you can decide to keep the pot small or apply pressure with a well-timed bet. When you see a lot of aggression ahead of you, folding without risking extra chips becomes a strategic choice. This flexibility lets you open a wider range of hands profitably from late position, sometimes as many as 40 to 50% of possible starting hands from the button, because you can adjust your play based on the action you see. In early position, things are different. You must act before most of the table, often with little idea of what others will do. This creates a situation where your hand must stand up to more pressure. There are more players left to act behind you, and any one of them could call, raise, or even re-raise. Because of this risk, the range of hands you should play from early position is much tighter. Many common approaches suggest opening somewhere around 12 to 15% of starting hands from early seats, though this varies depending on the game and your opponents. Even hands that look strong in a vacuum, like King 10 offsuit or Ace 9 offsuit, are often better folded here. That is because they are vulnerable to stronger hands that might be lurking behind you, waiting to act. Folding strong-looking hands in early position can feel counterintuitive. You might see two high cards and feel tempted to play, especially if you have done well with them in the past. But poker is not just about the cards you hold. It is about where you sit and how likely it is that someone behind you will wake up with a better hand or decide to apply pressure. The more players left to act, the greater the chance that you will face a raise or a tough decision for a large portion of your stack. Folding in these spots is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you understand the risks that come with acting first and want to avoid costly mistakes. Sometimes you'll watch as a hand you folded in early position would have turned into a winner if you had played it out. This is where it helps to remember that folding is about protecting yourself from the situations that cost you the most over time, not just the results of a single hand. By folding hands like those mentioned earlier, you avoid getting trapped in multi-way pots where these hands lose value quickly. You save your chips for times when your position lets you use information and control the pot more effectively. As you get more comfortable with this idea, folding becomes a tool for long-term profit, not just short-term safety. You'll notice that your stack stays healthier and that your tough decisions become less frequent. The hands you do play from early position will be stronger, and you'll be more confident facing action from behind. The discipline to fold these hands now opens up opportunities to win bigger pots later, when the odds and the position are more in your favor. Take a moment before each hand to find your seat in the order. Let that inform your choices, even when the cards pull you in a different direction. Folding in the right spots tends to get easier over time. The game starts to slow down, and position stops feeling like a detail. It starts feeling like the thing holding every decision together. Chapter 6: Bluffing and Semi-Bluffing, Advanced Techniques. The cards you hold don't always determine who wins the pot. Your goal is not to show down the best cards, but to win the pot by getting others to surrender. This move works best when you are convincing, and when your story fits what the other player expects from you. A big part of bluffing's power is psychological. You want the person across from you to doubt what they're holding, or even start to fear that you have them beat. That uncertainty is what creates pressure. The pressure tends to land hardest when your actions are believable, and they have learned to respect your bets. How others see you matters here. If you have played few hands and shown down strong cards, people will often see you as tight. That tight table image makes your bluffs more likely to succeed because the other player expects you to have strong hands when you bet. If you have shown lots of wild bluffs or loose calls, your image shifts. Players may start calling you down lighter, thinking you are capable of betting with anything. So, your history at the table shapes how they react to your bets in the moment. It is not just about one hand. The story you tell with your actions builds over time. If your bets and raises fit a consistent pattern, the other player is more likely to believe your bluffs. If you suddenly act out of character, a sharp opponent might catch on and challenge you. That is why successful bluffing is not just a single move, but an ongoing process of managing your image and reputation. Some players are harder to bluff than others. If you are up against someone who calls down with weak hands, your bluff will rarely work. Others fold strong hands quickly, and those are the players you want to target. So, picking your spots and knowing the other player is as important as the bluff itself. Bluffing rarely comes with certainty. You are taking a risk by betting with a weak hand, hoping the other player believes your story. When it works, you win a pot you would have lost at showdown. When it fails, you lose chips, and your table image may take a hit. The art is in choosing your moments, reading the room, and making your play fit the situation. There is another way to use deception that carries less risk. A semi-bluff lets you apply pressure while keeping real equity behind it. For example, you might hold a flush draw or an open-ended straight draw. You are behind for now, but a turn or river card could make you the favorite. The difference between a pure bluff and a semi-bluff comes down to your backup plan. A pure bluff can only win if the other player folds. A semi-bluff gives you two ways to win. If they fold, you take the pot right away. If they call, you still have outs to improve and possibly win at showdown. That extra layer of safety makes semi-bluffing a valuable weapon, especially when you are playing hands with drawing potential. Semi-bluffing is most effective before the river, when there are still cards to come. On the flop or turn, you can pressure the other player to fold with your bet, but you also have equity if the hand continues. This is not just about aggression. It is about using your draws to apply pressure, while keeping your options open. You force the other player to make a tough decision, knowing that you might get there if they call. This tactic helps you stay unpredictable. If you tend to bet only with strong-made hands, observant players will start catching on and folding whenever you show aggression. By mixing in semi-bluffs, you keep your range wide and force them to guess. This balance between value betting and semi-bluffing is what separates strong players from those who are too straightforward. When you think about semi-bluffing, the board texture matters. Some boards are better for representing strong hands, while others make your story less believable. You also want to consider who you are up against. Some players fold too much to aggression, while others will not give up easily. Learning to spot the right moments for semi-bluffing comes with experience, but it always starts with having real chances to improve your hand. Sometimes you will be on the other side, trying to decide if the other player is bluffing you. This is where reading betting patterns becomes crucial. When a player suddenly shows aggression after playing passively, or when their bet sizes change without clear reason, it can be a sign they are not as strong as they want you to believe. For example, a small bet on the flop, followed by an oversized bet on the river, doesn't tell a coherent story. Players who hold strong hands tend to build the pot in a more consistent way. Context is everything in these spots. If the hand started with several players and only one remains, the field is narrow enough to bluff more freely. But a smaller table also means your reads need to be sharper, because a single mistake is harder to hide. Bluffing tends to work better against a single opponent. Each extra player raises the likelihood that at least one of them holds something strong enough to call. Stack sizes, pot odds, and previous actions all shift the calculus of calling or folding when you suspect a bluff. Folding a good hand is never easy, but sometimes it is the best choice. If the evidence suggests the other player is representing strength without much substance, you must weigh the risks and rewards carefully. If calling will cost you a large portion of your stack, and the story does not add up, folding protects your chips for future hands. Discipline in these moments is what keeps you out of trouble and helps you make profitable decisions in the long run. Bluffing and semi-bluffing are advanced tools, but they only work when your story holds together. If you commit to a bluff and the narrative doesn't fit, you risk losing both chips and credibility. Take your time to ensure that your actions align with the tale you're telling. Each hand is an opportunity to refine your strategy and learn from the outcomes. Chapter 7: The Role of Bankroll Management in Folding. That stack of chips sitting in front of you is more than something to push into the middle. It's your ability to stay in the game. It's your margin against a cold run of cards. The way you treat it, and the money behind it, shapes your poker journey more than any single decision at the table. That separation between poker money and everything else is the foundation of playing without fear. When your poker funds are kept apart, you can make decisions at the table based on the game itself, not on what you can or cannot afford to lose. This isn't merely about being careful, it's about giving yourself a fair shot to play your best game, without the pressure of risking rent, groceries, or anything outside the world of poker. The heart of bankroll management lies in how much you risk at any one time. Most experienced players do not put their whole roll on the line in a single session or hand. For cash games, a common guideline is to keep at least 20 to 30 buy-ins set aside for your chosen stake. If the buy-in at your table is 300, that puts your target starting bankroll somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000. Tournament players tend to need a larger cushion, sometimes in the range of 50 to 100 buy-ins, because variance runs deeper and losing streaks can extend well beyond what cash game players typically experience. This discipline protects you from the risk of ruin, which is the chance of losing everything before the natural swing of variance turns in your direction. By keeping your risk small compared to your total roll, the chance of going broke decreases. You can weather the natural ups and downs of the game and return for more. This is what lets you move up in stakes when you are ready, or move down if you need to, always keeping yourself in the game. Now imagine you are deep in a session, facing a big decision. You have a strong hand, maybe the kind you would usually play for all your chips. But the bet in front of you is large. If you call and lose, it would take a big chunk out of your bankroll. This is where bankroll management steps in as a guide. Even strong hands are not invincible. Sometimes the board is coordinated, and your opponent's range is likely ahead. Sometimes the risk of losing a large portion of your roll outweighs the reward. Disciplined players fold in these spots, not because they are timid, but because they know that protecting their bankroll is the wise move. They would rather give up one pot than risk busting and losing the chance to play the next 100 hands. If committing chips here means risking too much of the bankroll, folding is not a sign of weakness. It is a proactive choice to keep playing, to let variance pass by without wrecking your foundation. You will see this in the habits of seasoned players. When their bankroll dips below the recommended number of buy-ins for a given stake, they move down in stakes. This keeps the risk manageable and gives them room to recover. Dropping down in stakes is a sign of awareness, not retreat. The real danger comes from pushing too hard, risking too much, and finding yourself shut out of the game because the roll is gone. Each disciplined fold, even with a strong hand, is a way of avoiding that outcome. Over time, this approach shapes your results. Players who make these careful folds, guided by bankroll management, tend to last longer at the tables. They're better positioned to weather the swings that knock others out of the game. Their results often feel more stable over time, with progress that's slower but more durable. This is how you build real success in poker, not through single huge wins, but through years of survival and growth. You will hear many professionals talk about their bankroll habits. Some move up after winning as few as 15 buy-ins, but most stick to the safer path of 20 or 30. They pick their games carefully. They make sure the risk matches the size of their bankroll. They keep poker money separate from everything else. They don't let emotion or ego pull them into games they can't afford. This isn't merely a safety net, it's a strategy. It is what lets them return to the tables consistently, maintaining their presence over the long haul. When you fold a strong hand because the risk is too great, you are not just surrendering a pot. You are protecting your ability to play the next hand, and the one after that. You are making a choice that says the long run matters more than the moment. In the quiet space after a tough fold, you will feel the calm of knowing you did not risk your future for a single hand. That is the habit that builds real confidence. Let yourself settle into this rhythm, knowing that every careful fold is another step toward a game that lasts. Chapter 8: Adapting to Opponents. Dynamic Strategies. Before your first hand is dealt, the table is already telling you something. Every game brings its own mix of habits and tendencies. Paying close attention early gives you an edge before the cards even start to matter. Start by watching how often each player enters a pot. Some players fold most hands and only get involved when they hold something solid. Others seem eager to play nearly every hand, calling and raising with a wide variety of cards. Some players rarely fold before the flop and apply pressure with bets and raises across a wide range of hands. Others play very few hands but come in hard when they do, only committing chips when their holdings justify it. Then there are players who enter pots selectively and mostly check or call once they are in. Each type has patterns you can read once you know what to look for. The best way to sort out these types is through patient observation. Watch as hands go to showdown and notice what cards each player reveals after heavy action. If someone keeps showing up with made hands after raising, you can trust their bets more. If another player is willing to show down weak or speculative hands after aggressive play, you are likely dealing with a loose aggressive style. Also pay attention to bet sizing. Large, sudden bets from a player who usually checks or calls can mean something very different than the same bet from a player who is always active. Settle into the rhythm of the table. Over time, these patterns will become clearer. The more you watch, the more you will understand what each action means and how it fits into that player's overall approach. You do not have to rush these judgments. Allow the information to come to you gradually. Once you have a feel for the players around you, you can start to adjust your own approach. If you are facing a tight, aggressive opponent, it pays to be cautious. When they bet or raise heavily, their range tends to be stronger than average. In these moments, folding a good but not great hand is often the right move. There is usually little to gain by challenging a player who tends to bet big only when their hand is a strong holding. Against loose, aggressive players, the situation shifts. Their wide range and frequent bets mean you can afford to continue with good hands more often. They are likely to be putting pressure on with weaker holdings, so you do not have to fold as readily. Instead, look for spots where you can call or even raise, knowing that their aggression is not always backed by good cards. With tight, passive players, the game requires a different adjustment. These opponents call more than they bet, so when they do make a large bet or raise, it usually signals real strength. Even hands that look solid on the surface may not be good enough here. If you see a tight, passive player suddenly raise large after calling on earlier streets, that shift in behavior is worth taking seriously. Releasing your hand in that spot is often the safer path. There is no single rule for how often to fold or how much to bet. What matters is that you are willing to adapt. If you cling to one strategy no matter what, you will miss opportunities and walk into traps. Skilled players tend to be flexible. They change gears when the table changes. They notice when a loose player tightens up, or when a quiet player starts betting more. Your willingness to fold a hand worth defending against the right opponents is a sign of this flexibility. Sometimes, the table itself can change the value of your hand. In multi-way pots, especially with several tight or straightforward players involved, hands that look strong in a heads-up situation can become much less valuable. If you are facing heavy action from players who rarely bluff or overplay weak hands, folding becomes the safer and smarter option. Board texture also matters. When the community cards create the possibility of very strong hands, and you face a big bet from a player who usually avoids large confrontations, you need to consider that your good cards might not be enough. In these spots, discipline means letting go, even if it feels like you are giving up a winner. It is not about being timid. It is about recognizing that opponent tendencies and board conditions can shift the balance against you. There will be moments when a tight player calls along for several streets, and then suddenly raises big when a dangerous card arrives. These are times to pause and trust your read. Even a hand that would be strong against most players may not be good enough here. Folding in these spots does more than save chips. It protects your bankroll and keeps you in the game for the hands that truly matter. Slow down when facing these decisions. Give your observations time to settle. When you fold a solid holding, because the table and your opponent tell you it is right, you are not just letting go of this pot. You are building a habit of dynamic play. You are learning to listen to what the game is really telling you, focusing on each opponent and decision. This is the quiet work that sets you up for long-term success, no matter how the table changes around you. Each fold becomes a step toward a more adaptable, thoughtful style. The game will keep shifting, and so will you. Chapter 9: The Significance of the Flop, Turn, and River. 3 cards land on the felt, and the hand you thought you understood suddenly looks different. The moment the dealer spreads those cards, every player's situation can shift in ways that weren't visible before. Hands that felt powerful just a moment ago can shrink in value or even become vulnerable. This marks the first big shift in a Texas Hold'em hand, and it is where discipline often gets tested. With 3 new cards in play, the board can connect in ways that create powerful hands or dangerous draws. For example, if you start with a pocket pair, you'll flop a set roughly once in every 8 tries. That means most flops will not deliver that big improvement, and you will need to look closely at how the board interacts with your cards. If you start with 2 connected cards, you'll flop an open-ended straight draw roughly once in every 10 hands. These are not common events, but when they do happen, they change everything about how you should proceed. New threats emerge with the flop. Sometimes the board comes out coordinated or brings high cards that fit well with hands your opponents might have. A once strong starting hand can drop in value when the board offers straight or flush possibilities, or when your pair is now beaten by what the board presents. The flop isn't just about your cards. It's about how your cards interact with everything the board now makes possible. Folding after the flop is not only normal, but often the smart play. Even if your hand looked good before, the new information might reveal that you are now behind or facing tough odds. Strong discipline means being willing to release hands that have lost their edge in the context of the current board. The flop tests your ability to reevaluate, to see your hand honestly, and to make a decision based on the new reality, not on hope or attachment to your starting cards. A single new card arrives with the turn, but the impact can be dramatic. Suddenly, there are 4 community cards, and the landscape grows even more complex. Each player now has more information to work with, and the possibilities for made hands and completed draws expand. After the flop, there were 47 unseen cards. Now there are 46. Each one remaining can still change what happens. The turn can complete a straight, a flush, or give someone 2 pair or a set. If you were holding an open-ended straight draw, you had roughly a 17% chance of completing it on the turn. If you were hoping to pair one of your unpaired whole cards, your chances were less than 13%. These numbers show how often hands improve, but also how often they do not. Most of the time you will not hit what you are hoping for. As the board develops, you have to look again at your situation. Maybe your hand was top pair on the flop, but now the turn brings another high card, or completes a possible draw. What was once a strong made hand could now be second best. Strategy shifts again at this point. Sometimes the right move is to slow down or even fold, rather than call another bet and risk a larger portion of your stack. The turn often exposes new threats that were not clear before, and being able to recognize those moments is what keeps your losses small and your chances alive for the hands that truly matter. Letting go on the turn takes patience. It also takes a willingness to accept that things change quickly. It's easy to get attached to a hand that looked good just 1 card ago. The best players are the ones who can pause, see what the new card means, and adjust their plan with calm, clear thinking. The final community card arrives with the river, and with it, all improvement ends. Whatever hand you hold now, that is what you will take to showdown. There are no more cards to come. Whatever hand you hold is the hand you'll take to showdown. The river cements the board's potential and forces a final, sometimes difficult decision. At this point, the possibilities are set. If the board presents a flush, a straight, or a full house, you must weigh your hand against every combination that could have gotten there. When you account for all possible 5-card combinations, a flush comes up roughly 3% of the time, a straight a little less than 5%, and a full house around 2.5%. These hands do not show up often, but when they do, they change what is possible for everyone at the table. Your most definitive decision must be made on the river. If you started with a strong hand, but the final card brings a dangerous combination, this is the moment to ask yourself if calling or betting is still wise. Sometimes the river will confirm that your hand is still best, but other times it will show you that folding may be the clearest way to avoid a costly mistake. Trusting your read of the board and being willing to let go, even when it is hard, is a mark of true discipline. Each street of play offers a unique challenge and opportunity to refine your approach. With every card that falls, the dynamics shift, requiring you to reassess your hand's strength in the context of the board and your opponents. Folding isn't about regret or lost opportunity, it's about making informed choices that protect your stack for future hands. By aligning your decisions with the evolving game, you gain clarity and readiness for whatever comes next. Chapter 10. Case Study. Folding Aces. That first glance at 2 aces is unlike anything else at the table. The hand is rare, it's powerful, and most players who've seen it understand why it carries such a strong reputation. The reputation is well earned. Pocket aces are rare, appearing in only 1 of every 221 hands on average, and they're the only hand that stands as a favorite against every other possible starting hand before the flop. It is no surprise that getting aces brings excitement and a sense of promise. Many players expect to win a big pot when they have them. They feel safe, eager, and sometimes even a little greedy, ready to put chips in the middle. This sense of security goes deeper than just excitement. In most cash games, your aces are seen as a hand that justifies playing aggressively and putting a large part of your stack at risk. Over many hands, over a large sample of hands, that starting hand tends to produce strong profit when played to showdown. This track record feeds the belief that folding aces before the flop is rarely the correct play in most standard situations. Players become attached to the hand, convinced that it will carry them through almost any situation. Because of this, it is easy to fall into the habit of overvaluing them, even when the context changes. The expectation is so strong that players sometimes ignore warning signs. They may feel that folding aces is unthinkable, or even a mistake, because the hand has such a powerful reputation. But the reality is that the strength of your aces can shift dramatically once community cards are revealed and the hand moves beyond the pre-flop stage. When you look past the initial excitement, you start to see situations where folding aces is not only reasonable but necessary. These moments usually come after the flop, when the community cards and the actions of your opponents paint a very different picture than the one you hoped for. In some hands, the board develops in a way that makes it much more likely someone else has made a stronger hand. For example, when the community cards are highly connected or all the same suit, the likelihood that an opponent has a strong made hand increases meaningfully. In these cases, an overpair like pocket aces can quickly lose its edge. The risk increases even more in multi-way pots. When several players are involved, the chance that one of them has made a strong hand goes up considerably. That's why experienced players slow down on dangerous community cards and think carefully about the range of hands their opponents could be holding based on how the betting has developed. If one or more players start showing a lot of aggression on a dangerous board, that is often a sign that your aces are no longer ahead. Paying attention to how the betting unfolds is especially important in these spots. In many cash games, when a player who has been passive suddenly bets or raises a large amount on a coordinated board, it can be a signal that they've connected well with those community cards. This is especially true when those bets come on the turn or river, after earlier signs of caution. In tournaments, the calculation shifts again. Sometimes, the risk of losing your entire stack or being eliminated is enough to justify folding aces if the betting strongly suggests you are beaten by a narrow range of stronger-made hands. What ties all of these scenarios together is the need to let go of the belief that pocket aces are unbeatable. The best players are willing to fold them when the evidence points in that direction. They trust what the community cards and their opponents are indicating, rather than clinging to the hope that their starting hand will hold up. This is not an easy shift to make. It means accepting that even the best starting hand is sometimes just one pair, and one pair is often not enough. Learning to fold aces in the right spots teaches you discipline. It is a reminder that poker is not just about the cards you start with, but about how you respond to the changing situation at the table. Each decision should be guided by the current context, the tendencies of your opponents, the sequence of bets, and the story the board is telling. It is common for players to feel uneasy or even regretful after folding such a strong hand, especially if they never see their opponent's cards. But over time, these disciplined folds help reduce the size of your losing pots. They help protect your stack and keep your results more consistent over time. You begin to see that folding aces in the right moments is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you are thinking deeply about the game and making choices that serve your long-term success. When you approach each hand with fresh eyes and a willingness to respond to what the table shows you, you open the door to a quieter, more stable game. The loud excitement of being dealt pocket aces fades as you settle into the calm of making each decision on its own merits. Let yourself notice when the story at the table changes. Be ready to let go of any hand, no matter how strong it looked at the start. That willingness is what makes room for clearer thinking and better decisions. Chapter 11. Online versus Live Play. Differences in folding strategy. The first thing you notice when you move from a live table to a screen is what disappears. There are no faces to watch. No chips to hear. No one shifting in their seat across from you. The first thing you notice online is what is missing. You cannot watch your opponent's faces. You do not see any nervous fingers, heavy breathing, or shifting in chairs. There is no sound of chips shuffling or eyes darting. In this setting, traditional tells disappear. You are left with a screen, a set of usernames, and a steady flow of digital information. With these changes, your folding decisions start to rely on other clues. In online no-limit Texas Hold'em, players often use tracking software or heads-up displays. These tools show statistics like the percentage of hands a player enters, how often they raise before the flop, and how aggressive they are across different actions. Over time, these numbers build a picture of how your opponent chooses hands, how frequently they bet, and when they tend to fold. You might also review hand histories after a session, looking for patterns in your own folds or those of your regular opponents. This creates a record far more detailed than what you would remember from a live session. Speed of action is another clue online. Sometimes, the time it takes for a player to check or bet gives you some sense of their decision process. A quick call or snap fold might mean something, but you have to be careful. Many online players keep several tables open at once, so their timing can be affected by distractions or even a slow internet connection. These timing signals are unreliable on their own. They work best when they line up with what the data already suggests. Anonymity changes the game as well. In some online pools, players' identities are hidden from hand to hand. Without the ability to build a history against a particular player, you lean more on population tendencies. Your folding decisions shift away from individual reads and toward the general patterns that most players in a given position tend to follow. This makes your folding strategy less about individual quirks and more about general trends and numbers. Patterns become your language, and disciplined folding relies on what the data tells you over time. When you move to a live table, the experience shifts. Suddenly, every action is colored by the people around you. You notice how someone tosses their chips. You pick up on the way they hold their cards, or whether their voice wavers when they bet. These physical tells, already familiar from earlier discussions, add a new layer to your folding decisions in the live format. You might notice a player's breathing change as the pot grows. Their posture can stiffen too. All of these signals can nudge you toward a fold you would not have made online. Still, these cues are not always reliable. Sometimes a player fidgets because they are nervous, not because they are bluffing. Other times, a seasoned opponent might act a certain way on purpose, hoping to mislead you. In live poker, players quickly learn how to mask their real feelings. They might count chips in a steady, deliberate way to appear calm. Others chat casually to mask tension. The challenge is that while these tells can be powerful, misreading them can be costly. It takes practice and experience to separate meaningful signals from noise. Beyond the physical, live poker brings a social atmosphere that shapes decisions. The conversations around you, the sound of chips, and the general rhythm of the table all influence how you feel about folding. Some players get caught up in the moment, letting the energy of the room push them into calls they would not make online. Others use the slower pace to study every detail, watching for small shifts in behavior that help them make tough folds when the pressure rises. One of the biggest contrasts between online and live poker is the pace of play. Online, the hands come fast. Software deals and collects chips in seconds. You might play hundreds of hands in a single session. That speed means you face folding decisions over and over. You often have only a short window to act. Most online sites give you a set window for each standard decision, typically somewhere in the range of 15 to 30 seconds, along with a small reserve of extra time you can use when a decision is especially difficult. When you play so many hands, folding marginal holdings quickly becomes routine. There is less drama in each decision, and your focus shifts to making solid, repeatable choices based on patterns and statistics. Live poker moves at a different tempo. Dealers shuffle by hand. Players count out chips and take their time. At a standard live table, you might play only 20 to 30 hands an hour. This slower rhythm gives you more space to think about each fold. When a big bet comes in, you can watch your opponent and consider the story of the hand. You have time to let the tension settle before you decide. You are more likely to weigh physical and behavioral clues, and the decision to fold feels more personal and considered. Adapting your folding strategy between these formats is not just about preference. It is about meeting the demands of each environment. Online, you'll find yourself leaning heavily on the numbers. The data and patterns become your main guide for deciding when you're likely behind. Physical confirmation simply isn't available, so the numbers have to carry the weight. In live play, you open yourself to a wider range of information, knowing that sometimes a small detail in someone's behavior will tip the scales. The slower pace gives you time to integrate these clues, but also asks for more discipline in not letting emotions take over. Players who adapt well between formats understand that folding online is often a matter of statistics and speed, while folding live requires reading people as well as situations. Each format tests your ability to stay flexible and aware. When you practice these adjustments, your folding decisions become sharper and more resilient, no matter where you find yourself playing. Chapter 12. Learning from the pros. Famous folds. Some of the most respected hands ever played ended with a fold. Not a win. Not a bluff. Just cards slid quietly across the felt. These decisions stand out because they show a different kind of strength. In high-stakes, no-limit Texas Hold'em, where the pressure is intense and every chip has real weight, even seasoned players sometimes let go of hands that look strong on the surface. Picture a feature table with cameras rolling and stacks worth hundreds of thousands in play. Experienced players sit quietly, each move watched by millions. In these moments, a player might spend several minutes deep in thought before sliding their cards away. The decision is not just about the two cards they hold. It is about everything they have noticed so far, the way their opponent bet, the timing of each action, and the sense that something does not quite add up. Skilled players know that in Texas Hold'em, there are 1,326 distinct starting hand combinations when suits are treated as unique. That variety means the true strength of any hand depends on the situation and the people involved. When a player folds a strong hand, it is rarely a snap decision. They have to weigh what they know about their opponent, what the betting suggests, and what the outcome might be if they continue. It is not uncommon for commentators to pause and highlight these moments, knowing that a deep fold can say as much about a player's skill as a big win. Pros watch for patterns. Did their opponent suddenly get aggressive? Has the rhythm of their betting changed? Sometimes it is a shift in posture, or a pause before a big bet that signals trouble. The player sitting across from them might be representing a hand that beats everything but the very strongest holdings. In these moments, they start to map out all the likely hands their opponent could have. They ask themselves what hands would make sense based on the action so far. Often they are willing to trust their read, even if it means laying down a hand that would beat most others. There is a kind of respect that comes with these folds. It is not about showing off discipline for the cameras. It is about survival and long-term success. Folding a strong hand in a big spot can signal to the rest of the table that the focus is on making sound decisions rather than just playing for action. These moments remind everyone watching that poker is a game of thought, not just luck. Now think about a different scene. The stakes are still high, but the tension is quieter. A player faces a huge bet and sits back, breathing slowly. They look at the pot, then at the chips they would need to call. This is where the math and the mind come together. Pot odds are in play. The player weighs whether the size of the call is justified by what's already in the middle. Suppose they have a drawing hand. With a gut shot straight draw, there are 4 outs. The chance of hitting on the next card is roughly 8%. The player considers whether the pot odds make a call worthwhile, but they also ask whether their opponent's story makes sense. If the bet is large and the board is dangerous, the risk may not match the reward. In high-stakes games, players often pause here, running through the numbers and their read on the opponent before making a reluctant fold. What makes these folds even more impressive is the psychological strain. The pressure is enormous. In games like these, a single decision can swing fortunes. The player might feel fear of being bluffed, or worry about how others will view their fold. Ego can creep in, whispering that they should not back down. Yet, experienced players know how to set those feelings aside. They rely on discipline and self-control. They have trained themselves to see each hand as a puzzle, not a personal battle. It is not easy to keep a cool head when the stakes are high and the lights are bright. They learn to breathe, focus on the facts, and let go of their attachment to their cards. They know that even a hand that's a strong favorite heads up can become a significant underdog when more players are involved in the pot. Each new opponent brings another chance that someone has a better hand or a better draw. That is why they do not just play the cards. They play the situation. These moments apply to your own games. You don't need to be playing for massive sums or under television lights to face similar decisions. In regular games, there are spots where an opponent makes a big bet on a board that looks dangerous. Maybe it is a coordinated run-out, or maybe the betting just feels off. The lesson is not to fold every time you feel pressure, but to pay attention. Watch for betting patterns. Notice when an opponent suddenly shifts gears. Listen to your own sense of the hand. After the flop has been dealt and 2 whole cards are in a player's hand, there are 47 cards that haven't been seen. 2 more will come, but you do not get to see them without risking more chips. When the bet is large and the story your opponent tells makes sense, it is sometimes right to let go of a hand that looks good on the surface. It's advice echoed across training sites and hand breakdowns aimed at developing players. They remind you to look beyond your own cards and consider what the action means. Developing the discipline to make these folds takes time. It helps to review hands after the fact, especially those where you felt unsure. Think about what skilled players would do. Would they call just to see, or would they trust their read and fold? Over time, patience becomes easier. Recognize the moments when folding is not a sign of weakness, but of respect for the game and for yourself. Practicing this kind of awareness takes time. When facing a big decision, slow down. Notice the patterns. Notice the pressure. Each fold that comes from real thought is a step toward a steadier game. As you watch and learn from expert-level play, let the lessons settle in and find your own decisions growing calmer and more confident, hand by hand. Chapter 13. The Emotional Rollercoaster of Folding. There is a strange kind of tension that builds in your chest when you know you should let go of a hand that feels too good to fold. Your heart might beat a little faster, or you may notice your mind racing through all the ways you could still win, if only you stayed in. In these moments, the pressure is not just about chips or cards. It is about the hope that this time, maybe, you are not beaten after all. That hope can be hard to shake, especially when you have put in a lot of chips already. The idea of letting go might feel almost painful, like you are throwing away all the effort you have put in so far. This is the sunk cost trap at work, pulling your attention toward what you've already put in, rather than what the situation actually calls for now. In poker, this can lead you to call when you know you should fold, just so you do not feel like you wasted your earlier bets. There is also the sting of regret that can come right after you fold a strong hand. It's possible that you'll find yourself staring at the board, watching as the next cards come out, and feeling a wave of frustration if they would have helped you. That feeling is sharp and immediate. It can make you question your decision, even if you made the right call with the information you had. There may be moments when you start to wonder, what if I had stayed in? That kind of thinking can linger and make the next tough fold even harder. Sometimes, the fear of being bluffed creeps in. You worry that your opponent is pushing you off the best hand, and you do not want to look foolish for folding. This fear can push you toward calling, even when deep down you know the odds are not in your favor. If you treat each difficult fold as a personal failure, the pressure builds. You can find yourself tilting, chasing losses, and letting your emotions drive your decisions. The first step toward mastering these emotions is noticing them as they come up. When you feel regret, frustration, or doubt, let yourself acknowledge it. You are not alone in this. Most players feel these things at some point, from beginners to experienced professionals. What tends to separate stronger players from others isn't the absence of these emotions. It's the ability to notice them and keep them from driving the decision. There are tools and routines you can use to steady yourself in these moments. One of the most useful habits is to pause before making a big fold and run through a simple mental checklist. Consider whether your opponent is likely to be betting for value with hands you can beat, or if their betting pattern suggests real strength. This kind of framework gives your mind something concrete to work with. It shifts your focus away from the discomfort of folding and toward the logic behind the decision. Another approach is to separate how you judge your folds from what happens after. Instead of thinking about whether the next card would have saved you, train yourself to evaluate your decision based only on what you knew at the time. This mental habit is powerful. It lets you accept that poker is a game of uncertainty, and that you can make the right play even if it does not work out this particular time. After your session, take a little time to review the hands where a tough fold left you doubting yourself. Many online players use hand histories to look back at these moments. You can tag those difficult decisions and revisit them later with more information to see whether the fold was sound. This exercise is not about beating yourself up. It is about building a library of experience, learning to spot patterns, and developing trust in your own process. If you find that emotions still get the better of you sometimes, it can help to build a small pre-game routine. Some players take a few deep breaths before sitting down. Others repeat a phrase in their mind, like focus on the long run or one hand at a time. These rituals do not have to be complicated. Their purpose is to ground you, so that when the pressure builds, you have something steady to return to. Practicing these habits tends to reduce the number of decisions you look back on with regret. You will notice yourself pausing instead of reacting. You will find it easier to let go of a hand and move on to the next one, even if the last fold stings for a moment. This is emotional resilience in action. The pressure doesn't disappear. You just stop letting it steer. You can look to the top players in the world for proof that this skill matters. In high-stakes tournaments, you will sometimes see a professional quietly muck a hand that would make most players sweat. The cameras might zoom in, and the commentators will talk about great discipline or remarkable composure. These moments are not rare flukes. They are the result of years spent learning to separate decision quality from outcome, and to accept the discomfort that comes with letting go. Some of these players have built reputations around their emotional control. When they face a huge bet and choose to fold a strong hand, they do not show regret or anger. Instead, they talk about the logic behind their choice, what the betting patterns told them, how the ranges lined up, and what the odds suggested. They've learned to trust their process. Each careful fold, in their view, is protection against bigger mistakes later on. The long-term rewards for this kind of discipline are not always obvious. You may not see the chips you save in the same way you see the pots you win. But over hundreds or thousands of hands, this steadiness adds up. Professionals who tend to manage their emotions well are generally better positioned to stay in the game longer, reduce tilt, and keep their decision-making steady when the pressure is highest. You do not have to be a world-class player to benefit from these skills. Every time you pause before a big fold, every time you take a breath and focus on your process rather than your emotions, you are building the same kind of resilience. Let yourself settle into each moment. Trust that the discomfort will pass, and that you are laying the groundwork for deeper, more advanced strategies in the future. When you fold with clarity and calm, you are not losing ground. You are building a foundation that will carry you through the swings of the game, hand by hand. Chapter 14. Developing a personal folding strategy. Your habits at the table tell a story. Most players have never stopped to read it. Sit down with notes from your recent sessions, or if you can, review hand histories from games you have played. Focus on the moments where you chose to fold. Try to identify tendencies in your decisions. Do you find yourself folding too often when facing a raise, or do you tend to call down with weak hands hoping for a miracle? Maybe you notice that you give up quickly in early position, or that you rarely fold in late position when the pot has grown. Each of these behaviors tells you something about your natural style and your current tendencies. You might find that you lean toward passivity. Calling too much and rarely raising is a habit common to players who prefer to react rather than lead. This approach can keep you out of trouble in some spots, but it often means you are losing small amounts over and over. Conversely, maybe you notice a streak of aggression, with frequent bets and raises that put pressure on others, but sometimes leave you exposed when your hand is not strong enough. Both styles have strengths and pitfalls. The key is to see where you fall on this spectrum and how it shapes your folding decisions. As you review these trends, pay attention to the types of hands you tend to fold or play. Weak starting hands tend to share a few qualities. Low card ranks, poor suitedness, and little connection between cards are the most common markers. If you notice yourself holding on to these hands too often, you might be giving up equity in the long run. Alternatively, if you are folding hands that most players would consider playable from your position, you could be missing opportunities. Look for spots where folding protected you. Saving your stack when an opponent shows a very strong hand is exactly the kind of outcome worth noting. Notice, too, the times when folding might have cost you a chance to win a big pot. Over time, these signals become clear. Maybe you see that you fold too quickly after missing the flop, or that you cannot let go of decent hands when the board turns dangerous. The value of tracking these habits is that you get a real sense of your strengths and weaknesses. Self-reflection is what allows you to move forward. It's about recognizing where your habits help or hurt you. Once you have a sense of your style, you can start blending in strategies from what you have already learned. Recall the key ideas about folding from earlier in your studies. Position is almost always one of the most important factors to weigh. Consider how it applies to your folding strategy. Check your position before each decision to fold or continue. Over time, this small step becomes second nature. Apply what you know about betting trends and aggression levels to shape your choices. If a player who rarely bets suddenly makes a large wager, that's worth paying attention to. If you are facing a player who always seems to push the action, you might adjust your folding range accordingly. These observations help you refine your approach, blending your own tendencies with what you see at the table. The math also plays a role. When you hold two unpaired cards and miss the flop, continuing often depends on your draw potential, your position, and what your opponent is representing. Understanding the rough likelihood of improving by the river helps you decide when continuing is worth the risk. These numbers give you a framework for when to continue and when to let go. Self-awareness is the bridge that connects your personal habits with the broader strategies you have studied. Try to stay conscious of your process as you play. If you notice yourself folding out of habit, rather than clear reasoning, pause for a moment. Ask yourself if this spot is really the same as the last, or if something has changed. Adaptability is what lets you move away from rigid behaviors and into a more flexible, thoughtful game. A consistent folding strategy is not about following a fixed set of rules. It is about having a repeatable process that you trust, but that you can also adjust as new situations come up. Imagine you are facing a large bet on a coordinated board, where many strong hands are possible. A disciplined folding strategy helps you let go of marginal hands, avoiding the temptation to chase draws or call down in spots where the pot odds are not there. Having this process in place keeps you from making costly mistakes when the pressure is on. Instead of reacting emotionally or folding out of frustration, your decisions are based on the information at hand and the habits you have built. That difference matters. When you can make folding decisions with clarity, you'll often find that your losses in difficult spots start to shrink, and your confidence tends to follow. It is important to keep checking in with yourself as you gain experience. The game changes, your opponents adjust, and your own understanding deepens. Regularly review your folding decisions. Look for emerging trends and be willing to tweak your approach. This ongoing self-assessment is what supports long-term growth. Even the most disciplined players keep refining their process, learning from each session. A folding strategy that fits your style will not only protect your stack, but also help you play the rest of your hands more confidently. When you know why you are letting go, and you trust the process, your game becomes steadier. Let yourself settle into this rhythm. With each review and each adjustment, you're building something that compounds over time. The folds you make with confidence don't announce themselves. They just quietly strengthen everything that comes after. Chapter 15: Common Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. The decision to fold can feel straightforward until you are actually in the moment, and the pull to stay in takes over. Still, many players find themselves caught in patterns that lead to trouble. One of the most common traps is the fear of missing out. That pull towards staying in a pot, even when the odds point the other way, can quietly override a plan you set before the hand started. Another frequent issue comes from overvaluing certain hands. It is easy to feel attached to cards that look good or have worked for you in the past. Maybe you have seen pocket tens or ace-king suited win big pots, so you start to believe they are always worth playing. The reality is that even strong starting hands arrive only a small fraction of the time, and weak hands like 8-3 offsuit or 10-4 suited rarely improve enough to make continued play worthwhile. Yet the emotional pull of a favorite hand can cloud your judgment and make folding feel much harder than it needs to be. Confirmation bias quietly shapes these moments too. You notice what supports your hand and filter out what warns against it. Layer that over a pot where you have already committed chips and the sunk cost fallacy takes hold, making it harder to step back, even when the situation has shifted against you. If you start to notice these patterns in your own play, you are already taking the first step toward better decisions. Folding is not just about the cards you hold, but about recognizing when your mind is leading you away from sound strategy. With two unpaired whole cards, you can expect to miss the flop around 2/3 of the time. Most hands simply will not connect, and most of the time, folding is the right move. Once you are aware of these traps, you can start to build habits that protect you from them. One of the most effective ways is to set personal guidelines before you play. These can be as simple as deciding which hands you will fold from early, middle, or late positions. A position-based starting hand chart gives you a ready reference for those decisions. When you have a plan for each seat at the table, you are less likely to let emotion or bias drive your action. It also helps to use statistics as an anchor. For example, if you know that the chance of flopping a set with a pocket pair is roughly 1 in 8, you can avoid chasing unlikely outcomes without the right pot odds. When you hold an open-ended straight draw on the flop, you have roughly a 1 in 3 chance to complete it by the river, if you see both the turn and the river. If the pot odds are not in your favor, folding becomes a clear choice. Letting numbers guide you keeps your decisions grounded in reality, not hope. Another useful habit is tracking your folding decisions after each session. You do not need a detailed journal, just a few notes on hands, where you felt unsure or emotional. Over time, you will start to see patterns. Maybe you are too reluctant to fold after investing chips, or you chase draws without enough outs. These notes help you spot trouble before it repeats. Some players find it helpful to use a simple checklist or mental cue before committing chips. Ask yourself whether this hand fits your position. Ask whether the odds are in your favor. Ask whether you are reacting to fear of missing out or following your plan. A pause like this can break the pattern of automatic, emotional decisions and bring you back to a more disciplined approach. It is not enough to simply know the right plays in theory. You need ways to practice making better decisions under pressure. One exercise is to run through hypothetical situations away from the table. Imagine facing a big bet with a flush draw. A 9-out flush draw completes roughly 1 in 5 times on the next card. Practice deciding whether to call or fold based on pot odds and your stack size. The more you rehearse, the more natural these calculations will feel when the game is live. Decision-making frameworks can help you weigh risk and reward in real time. Try building a quick mental decision tree. Ask what happens if you call and miss, versus if you fold and save your chips for a better spot. Remember that making 2 pair by the river with an unpaired hand is far from guaranteed and happens only a portion of the time, so chasing with weak holdings is rarely worth the risk unless the price is right. If you want to build confidence, run through simulated hands or watch others play and pause to decide what you would do in their spot. The goal is not to be perfect, but to build a habit of thinking clearly about risk and reward, and to slow yourself down before each big decision. Ease into these habits. Let the numbers and your own guidelines take some of the weight off your shoulders. When you fold with purpose, you are not giving up. You are protecting your stack and keeping your mind clear for the hands that matter most. Each careful decision becomes a step toward a steadier, more thoughtful game. Chapter 16. Conclusion: Mastering the Fold. Letting go is harder than it looks. Not because the mechanics are complicated, but because every fold asks you to trust your thinking over your instincts. That tension is what this series has really been about. You've learned to view each folding decision through the lens of risk and reward, using the tools you've built up across each chapter to guide your choices. Every time you choose to fold, you're weighing the potential gain against the likelihood of being outdrawn or dominated, just as you would with an open-ended straight draw, where the chance of completing on the next card is roughly 17%. You've seen how folding weak starting hands, like unsuited low combinations, is simply good practice, while more marginal hands require an honest look at position and table dynamics. Over time, you've built a mental checklist, Evaluate the strength of your hand, consider your position, factor in the board texture, and pay attention to your opponents. When the numbers or the patterns tell you that folding is the most profitable action, you let go, even when it feels uncomfortable. That's not passive play. It's a deliberate choice rooted in discipline and clear thinking. What separates the best players from the rest often comes down to mental discipline and emotional control. The game will test your attachment to strong but vulnerable hands, especially when the pot grows and the stakes feel high. There'll likely always be moments when the urge to call or chase outweighs what the evidence is telling you. The pressure of tournament pay jumps can make it hard to fold top pair or an overpair when the signs point to trouble. The sting of already having chips in the pot makes it harder still. You know how quickly hope and frustration can turn a marginal call into a costly one. The ability to pause, take a breath, and make the tough fold is what sets the disciplined player apart. This kind of control does not arrive all at once. It is a skill you build slowly, by reviewing your decisions after each session and separating the quality of your choices from their outcomes. Accepting that the best folds sometimes feel wrong in the moment is part of this process. Over time, you may notice yourself staying calmer under pressure, letting go of hands with less regret, and trusting your read more than your emotions. Your growth as a player does not stop here. Mastery of folding, like every poker skill, requires continued learning, honest reflection, and practice. Take time to review hands where you faced a difficult decision. Focus especially on those big river spots, with strong but non-nut hands. Ask yourself whether you made the most profitable choice. Use tracking tools or hand histories to spot patterns. Notice how often you call 3-bets with small pocket pairs. Notice how often you let go of weak draws early versus late. Practice hand ranking recognition and board texture evaluation until these steps become second nature. Set aside regular time for off-table analysis, and don't hesitate to seek feedback from trusted players or coaches. Books, training videos, and forums can all help you deepen your understanding. Just as important, pay attention to your emotional state during sessions. Notice when frustration or fear creeps in, and make a habit of tracking how those feelings influence your decisions. The process of improvement is incremental. Each lesson from a tough fold adds another layer to your strategic mindset. Over weeks and months, folding with confidence can shift from feeling like willpower to feeling like habit. Let your curiosity lead you as you continue to play. Take pride in each careful fold, knowing that you're building a game grounded in discipline and resilience. When you sit at the table, let these principles guide your choices. Trust that mastery comes from the quiet work of making good decisions, one hand at a time. Let the game slow down around you. Each fold is another step toward the kind of player you want to become, prepared for whatever the cards bring next.